Smitty had just drifted off into a deep sleep when a strange sound awoken him. Scratching on the cabin door, and the sound of someone saying,
"Give me back my daily boat."
Hello, cool friends. Welcome to the Freaky Fam podcast. I'm Em.
and I'm Daw, and we have a little classic to tell you. Ever heard of a creature called the Telepo?
I can't take that name seriously. I am
Some call
not.
it some call it the Telepo, and some people call it the Telebone. People don't really know what the monster was saying because of its voice, the way it sounds. So there's books actually written about this thing, and the book titles are called Telepo. So I think it had an accent, so that's probably why it sounded like Telepo. So I think I'm going to do my first try at getting into voice acting. I'm going to do my southern accent that I'm really good at because mimicked my grandpa all these years. His was a pretty strong. It was probably a speech impediment and an accent, to be honest. So, which I got too. So, I think I'll be able to do it pretty well. So, I guess we'll just jump right into it.
I'm ready.
The trials and tribulations of living in today's modern society can wear on you. Sometimes you need to connect with nature. And the same thought and sentiments had old Bill Smith. He had gave up all the luxuries and, if you ask me, some of the necessities of the modern life. He loaded up the barest essentials and his 3 hunting dogs in a truck and moved all the way up north in a Georgia mountain. Smitty, that's what the folks at the town called him. Smitty didn't think it would be much of an adjustment. After all, he loved hunting, fishing, and the great outdoors. And he also had his great companions, his 3 best friends, his dogs. What more could a man ask for? You can grow very weary of dealing with bills, taxes, insurance, traffic, and pollution, not to mention anything about trying to keep food in your fridge. Oftentimes, the whole thing makes you want to holler and throw up your hands. Smitty built himself a nice little cabin in the back of the woods. It wasn't very big, but it was enough for him. The cabin only had 2 rooms. One was the bedroom, and the other was all the other rooms: living room, dining room, kitchen. He had built himself a nice big fireplace where he could cook food and warm his body on chilly nights. He planted himself a nice vegetable garden on the side of the house, and he would hunt and fish for most food. But at least once a month, he would take the 20-minute drive down the mountain to a little store. There he could provide himself with things he could not get out in the woods. Smitty had no problem catching small game as he needed, but the colder months provided it a little bit more difficult to keep his stomach full. Well, it was one of those cold wintry nights when Smitty went out into the storage shed to see what he could find for dinner. All he could find, a small piece of fatback meat. What is fatback meat? What is that?
It's like a rump roast.
Oh, fatback meat. Fatback meat, if I can say it right.
You know,
And
they're
a
calling
handful of
like
rice.
big booties like big backs. I mean, that's what my
Yes. Big bags. That's what I thought when I read that part. And a handful of rice. There was way too much snow on the ground to drive down 20 minutes to the store, so he had to make do with what he had. He ate the fatback and a little bit of the rice and gave the rest of the rice in the water that he used to boil the meat. He boiled the meat and ate it. Okay. I mean, he had a whole fire, but yeah, boil your meat and the water he used to boil the meat to the dogs. After all, they had to eat too. He called out.
Just gave them water with the juice.
Water with the rice. Yeah.
Oh.
And a little bit of the
Poor
rice.
dogs.
Okay, now here's where I'm going to try to say his accent. I'm going to have a hard time not laughing. Okay. Come here, doggies. Come out here and get you some dinner. Those dogs came running as fast as fast as they could and lapped up that rice mixture. That sounds so gross. Smitty was still a little hungry, but there wasn't much he could do about it. So despite his protests of his grumbling belly, Smitty stoked the fireplace to keep the cabin warm, and he went to bed. The sound of the wind blowing around in through some of the places in the tiny little cabin almost lulled Smitty to sleep. When he heard something, he opened his eyes and he saw a shadow on the wall. He eased himself out of the bed and tiptoed into the other room. He saw the oddest looking creature he ever done seen. It was short and stubby with pointed ears, short, fat feet, and long claws, and one big, long, bushy tail. There was no open doors or windows, so Smitty was confused how that funny-looking thing got inside. Smitty quietly picked up his axe and crept over to the odd creature. He was devouring some insects of some sort. He raised his axe and came down squarely on that creature's tail. Smitty turned to catch the varmint, but the thing was too quick. It hurried and escaped through the wall. So Smitty was left standing there holding that long bushy tail and a blood-laden axe. With no sign of the funny-looking creature, Smitty was about to throw the old tail outside. Then his growling stomach reminded him of how hungry he was. So he took the tail and cleaned it. He cooked it with some of the herbs that he had from his garden stored away, and he ate it. It didn't taste that bad. Why, it kind of tasted like chicken. That's what they all say. With his stomach finally full, Smitty went on back to his warm, cozy bed. Smitty had drifted off into a deep sleep when a strange sound awakened him. It sounded like something trying to scratch away at the cabin. Perhaps a raccoon, Smitty thought. If he stayed really quiet, he'd probably go away. So he stayed as quiet as he could, and then he heard a strange, otherworldly voice, which hissed,
Tilly Bo, I want my Tilly Bo.
Smitty thought the wind was playing tricks on his ears, but he heard it again.
Tilly Bo, I want my Tilly Bo.
So that's where I think people are getting mixed up if he's saying Taily Bone or if he's saying Taily Po, like his name. Because people think that the creature's name is Taily Po, but I'm pretty sure he's actually saying Taily Bone. And if the little creature is southern, maybe that's why he's saying Taily. Taily Po. Smitty jumped out of bed and flung open the door and called for his dogs. Come over here and Come over here and see what's making that noise. Come on, dogs. The dogs were barking and sniffing all around and couldn't find anything. So Smitty put his dogs back inside and went back to bed. Sleep had eased itself into Smitty's body, and then he heard the voice again. This time, the scratching sounded like it was coming from the window. Whatever it was, he really, really wanted inside. But the scratching seemed to be on two walls at one time. Smitty called out, Hey! Hey, watch out that door. Get away from you.
I can just think of Grandpa every time.
Yes. Then he heard the strange voice again, only this time a little louder.
Tilly Bo, I want my Tilly Bo. I'm coming to get my Tilly Bo.
Old Smitty didn't get frightened too easily, but he was getting a little shaky. This was getting downright odd. So he eased on the way to the window and called for his dogs. Come on over here and see what that scratching is at that house. The three dogs bounded up on the porch and sniffed around and barked and sniffed, but they didn't find anything at all. Smitty decided to stay up for the rest of the night, protect himself and his dogs. So he pulled up a chair next to the fireplace and grabbed a blanket and settled in for a rest. With the wind-chilled wintry night, sleep soon overtook him. I think he has an issue. How can he fall asleep so easily? What is this, the fourth time that he has fallen asleep? He's like, I'm so scared that something's trying to break in. I'm asleep now. I'm gonna go to sleep. Sleep soon overtook him, and once again he dozed off. It was almost dawn when Smitty woke up. The sound of the scratching seemed to reverberate from every area in the cabin. Smitty searched frantically for an axe or a rifle, or something to defend himself with. But he was too frightened and couldn't find anything. The scratching grew louder and louder and louder.
Tilly Bo, where is my Tilly Bo? Give me back my Tilly Bo.
This reminds me of Give Me Back My Golden Arm that Granny used to tell us. Smitty yelled back, Leave me alone. I ain't got no telly poke. He called for his dogs. Get over here. Dogs, protect your old owner. This time the dogs didn't come. So he called again. Don't you hear me calling for you? Come here, doggies. He waited and waited, but not a dog came running. Smitty had never been this scared in his life. He ran to his bed and jumped in. I would be running for my life outside because your inside is trying to get inside, then I'd probably try to get outside and then run for my life. That's your best bet. What would you do, Em?
If I heard it the first time I'd run, the fact that he's still like, probably fine.
And the funny thing is, before he went to sleep when he felt safe with his dogs by the fireplace, I wouldn't get my blanket because this guy's so sleepy. He's such a sleepyhead. He gets his blanket. I would have got my rifle and my axe then and held it with me if I was planning on staying up all night, you know? He ran to his bed and jumped in. The scratching and the voices grew louder and louder. Smitty yelled back as loud as he could, I ain't got no telepo. Why don't you all leave me alone and go about your own business? I ain't never hurt nobody. Just leave me alone. The scratching seemed like it was inside the house. Now the voice was very loud and defining. The scratching was now in his room. Smitty then felt the scratching up the bottom of his bed. Then he saw it. A short, stubby creature with pointed ears, fat feet, and long claws, and bloodshot red eyes that glowed in the dark. Eyes that seemed to burn straight through Smitty. Before he could pull the covers back over his head, the thing pounced on his chest. It looked straight down at him and said,
You've got my daily bow. Now you're gonna give it back.
Smitty yelled, I ate it. I ate your telly bow. It's gone. It's gone. The thing started scratching and clawing away at poor old Smitty, trying to get that telly bow back. That telly bone, I'll say, because I think that's what it's actually talking about. Smitty tried to fight back, but the thing was way too strong, and those claws were way too sharp. Smitty's scream echoed through the dark mountains. Then they stopped, leaving a chilling silence. After a month or two of not hearing from Smitty, the folks that owned the little store down at the base of the mountain went up to the cabin to see if he was all right. When they got there, they just found his cabin torn to shreds, but no sign of Smitty or the dogs. They searched the woods and called them, but they never got a response. When the search party were heading down the mountain, the wintry wind began to blow, and a strange voice could be heard saying,
Daily bow. Daily bow. Now I got my daily bow.
When I first heard it, I was like, this thing is so scary.
So
People were scared of-
He got eaten by the guy because he.
Yeah,
ate
he
his
ripped it out of his
telly bow?
stomach. That reminds me, maybe I should tell the story of the golden arm real quick since that's so similar. I'll just tell it from memory. Okay, I'll tell you guys a story that our grandma used to always tell us, and it's called The Golden Arm. This is just going off of memory, what I remember. Once upon a time, you know it's a good story when it starts with that. Once upon a time, there was a husband and wife, and they got married, whatever. The guy came into a lot of money somehow. He ended up having an accident and he got his arm cut off. And so he said, since we got all this money, I'm going to make myself a golden arm. That seems like a good idea. So that's what he did. So he replaced his missing amputated arm with a golden arm. And this golden arm was his prized possession. And his wife didn't like him very much. So she was looking at different ways that she could maybe get rid of him and get his money. So she was plotting different ways that she could get rid of him to get his wealth. So she ended up doing the classic. She put some poison in his beef stew. So he ended up dying.
Antifreeze.
Yeah, he ended up dying, as one does when they get arsenic put in their beef stew. And his one wish in his will was, when it was read, is for him to be buried with his golden arm. That's how much he loved his golden arm. Of course, his wife was protested against this, and she was really mad about this. Even though she got everything else, she had something against him, his love for that golden arm. He loved that golden arm more than he loved her. So she wanted to get it and melt it down and then make her some jewelry out of it. But she wasn't able to because in his will, it said that he would be buried with it. So she was thinking of all these different ways how she could get that. So she thought of a plan to go steal his golden arm when no one was looking, right before he was buried. She was going to ask the people to have a moment with him. So before they buried him, and that's when she ended up taking and hiding his golden arm. So she went home after the funeral and she pulls out this golden arm that she stole out of his casket. And she was so happy and proud with herself. So she ended up putting it up in the closet until she could figure out what to do with it or melt it down or any of that, take it to a jeweler or something. So that's what she did. And she ended up going to bed early because it was a long day. You know, burying your husband takes a lot out of you. Stealing golden arms. So she went to bed. And all of a sudden, she heard steps. They sounded like the steps were coming from the front door of the house. And a soft voice saying, she couldn't hardly make out what he was saying, or what it was saying, or if it was just the wind. So she tried to ignore it, thought it was maybe kids playing some prank, or maybe it was just the wind. So she tried to go back to sleep, but the steps got louder. The steps sounded like they were now walking up the stairs. And the voice also got louder too, and she could understand what it was saying. It was saying, "Give me back my golden arm." Started to get freaked out. Who knew about it? Who knew about her, taking this golden arm? She was thinking that maybe one of his friends or one of his family members caught her and they were playing a trick on her to get back at her for what she did. So she ended up getting up real quick and locking the door and hiding under the bed. Steps got louder and more approaching. They got up to her door and it started banging on her door. And she started to get scared and she was like, okay, under the bed is where first place people look. So she gets out of the bed and then she goes into the closet where the golden arm is. And then all of a sudden she hears the door fling open and the footsteps get louder and she hears, "Give me back my golden arm." The footsteps stopped right in front of the bed. And she thought it was looking around for her. So she put her hands over her mouth and she just didn't want to make a sound. The footsteps started walking away again. She was thinking it was leaving the room. She let out a deep sigh of relief. "Give me back my golden arm." Nobody heard from the wife for about a month, okay? So people just got worried and went to go check on her. And then they found her dead in her closet. And the golden arm was nowhere to be seen. But the grave of her husband seemed to be dug up. And when they dug him up to check like what was going on, if his body might have been missing or something, they found him, R.I.P. in there with his with his golden arm, like nothing was wrong. The end. Now that story was just going off my memory because I couldn't hardly remember anything. I just remember our favorite part of the story. We didn't care about anything else. We just couldn't wait to scare each other with because we would just sit there and wait, and then try to yell to scare him. So I'm wondering what the Telepo actually is. Because they're saying it's a ghost story. I wonder if it's some kind of spirit possessed animal and that's why it can talk, Appalachians, is that how you say it? I think that's it. Okay.
Yeah,
The origin from the story is a rural Appalachian tale description of the creature. The description of the creature varies widely, though it almost always has thick black-brown fur and red-yellow eyes that glow. It has a long tail and sharp claws and generally about the size of a dog. Its body shape ranges from ape-like or rodent-like creature.
I was like, I want to know how it can talk.
Yeah.
Apparently not very good.
Features, yeah. Behaviors. The origin of the myth of the Telepo demonstrates the ability to speak. This is the most often described as a raspy, feral voice. It is likely carnivorous, as many versions of the story it devours or implied devours humans and dogs. This is a creature who treasures its prized tail. and will stop at nothing to get them back. So they're saying that there might be multiple of these types of creatures. It says they have also been shown to be destructive creatures, to going as far as burning down houses to accomplish their goals. In some tellings of the stories, they like spiders and insects. Oh, that's why it was eating some kind of bugs. So if it likes eating bugs, then why does it? I guess it might have not eaten the man, even though they said his body was never found and neither were the dogs. But it never said technically that he ate it, you know. So I bet you this is a type of creature that the Appalachians, they saw this thing. They're like, what is that weird looking varmint?
Probably was
Oh,
a wolf or
that's probably a
something.
telepo. It almost makes me think like it is some type of different type of creature, like almost like Bigfoot or something like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the history and
Very
origin of the telepo or the telebone lover, the tail lover. Most people know at least some of the traditional Appalachian folk tales. The Mountain Jack tales, for instance, are extremely popular. Never heard of those. Less well known, perhaps for good reason, is the story of the Telepo. The Appalachian region covers over 730,000 square miles. It stands to reason that something might be running around out there that's not good. Creatures like the Mothman and Bigfoot, that's what I was thinking. It's some type of monster. Bigfoot tend to get all the press. Whether or not you put your faith in any of their existence, well before these movie stars, monsters, and Appalachian, if I can say that right, region was haunted by things that avoided the limelight. The demons in the Telepost story is one of those such creature. One reason the Telepo demon, so they're saying that it's a demon. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
that's what it seems like more to me.
Yeah, eluded big media is because there does not seem to be any agreement on what exactly this thing is, or even what it looks like. Most stories about the Telepo describe him to be something like a wild dog, but in others it's less distinct, more like demon like. Other versions describe the Telepo like a demon like cat with glowing green eyes. It is what makes the story more scary. There are about as many versions of the Telepo as there are storytellers. To make some sense of where Telepo comes from, I consulted Luke Boersman, who published the Weekly Holler, the Weekly Holler, an online newsletter of gritty history of American folklore. Boersman is from the Appalachian foothills of southern East Ohio, and he makes it his business to know about the varmints like the Telepo. He explained that the Telepo is one of those stories that is hard to trace, especially because it's so widely known in many forms. As I've looked over the history, it strikes me that it seems to be the product of an American melting pot, African American telling story blended with European folklore. He told me of the earliest writing of the Telepo is by Bear Rabbit's story called Telepo, recorded by Joel Chandler Harris in Uncle Remus Returns in 1918. The story differs considerably from the controversial one with the hunter and the demon like animal. The Telepo does share some common attributes with much older tales from European folklore. A strong description about it, they say it's, I guess, a critter of some type. Most people say it has fur. Most people say they all can agree on one thing. It has a tail, has a long tail. But some say it's cat-like, some say it's dog-like, but I think those are very similar. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
If it has glowing eyes, everybody agrees it's glowing. They just don't agree on the color. I bet you if there's multiple telepoles, they probably just have different colored eyes, you know? That's why the description is a bit different. Because if there's a family of telepos out there, they're gonna look different, you know? They're not gonna all look the same. It's also interesting to think that some Appalachian person just sitting up in the mountains rocking on their rocking chair, and the kids are bugging him, their old granddad, to tell him a story, and like, oh, you want to hear a story? I'll tell you a story. And so I'm figuring that's just where it came from, you know? It was just some old person that just came up with this story. A lot of those stories, somebody comes up with them that way because it's basically the same thing we're doing to this day, like with new creepy pastas.
Mm.
Somebody came up with the Slender Man, or somebody came up with Jeff the Killer, all those that we know so well, or the Smile Dog. People are still doing those, and they've been doing those for so long that it was probably just some old grandpa that just made up this weird varmint creature, because it'd be more believable for them to see some kind of a furry creature, up there. I love the thought of that. Somebody, because I would love to do that to this day. When I'm old, I'm gonna be telling your kids and your kids' grandkids these stories, and then making them think that they're real. And I'm gonna be walking on a wheelchair, and I'll have that old Southern accent, and then they're never gonna want to come see me because I tell them those stories. And then they'll be talking about us years down the line, being like, "Where did this story come from? Does it real or not?" And I forgot to get our begging out of the way, our e-begging out of the way. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, rate our Spotify podcast. We
Just
are
5
almost to a
stars.
yes, we are almost to 100 subscribers. It was 11:11 a little bit ago, and little did you know I was making a wish when I looked at my phone. So yeah, I wished for all of you guys to subscribe to the algorithm to push our content, and we're gonna become famous storytellers. Also, be doing this February. We're gonna be meeting up, and we're gonna be causing mischief. We're gonna be getting around to mischief and recording it for you guys to see over on our YouTube, and also making shorts and all that good stuff.
We'll have
So,
is it a EMF reader?
yes, we're gonna do some ghost hunting. We're also going to
Yes.
confront
Some
Bloody
underground
Mary.
tunnels here in my
Yes.
city.
And we're also going to confront Bloody Mary and ask why she's still bitter after all these years. But
I think that's what
anyways,
we'll do.
yes, you're gonna want to see this, and it's gonna be uploaded on our YouTube. So you can subscribe to see that. Come back. So lots of cool things coming up, and you will want to see them, believe me. Anyways, so with that said,
Lock your doors and check your windows.
and don't let no telly po inside.